I'm Black, I'm a woman, and I'm transgender, and I'm an athlete. Now I wake up every day and I have to make sure that I make it home alive. Just existing is resistance.
Mainstream media hasn't learned anything and is still pushing radical trans activism and calling it journalism. We're going to break this down and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our politics, and our media, all from an independent perspective. Up first, like I mentioned, we're going to go over a really strange interview that CNN just did with transgender athlete Cece Telfer, who is a trans woman, aka biologically male, and is a high-level track and field athlete who actually became the first trans athlete to win a Division II championship. Cece now hopes to compete in the Olympics, but probably won't be able to do so because of the Trump administration's policies that restrict women's sports to only biological females. Now, you might have hoped that this interview would offer some serious scrutiny and pushback or explore the questions about the trans athlete debate with some nuance, but instead, predictably, it just turned into kind of a sob story hour for this trans athlete, with the journalist just basically giving her the platform to pop off about her feelings and not really pushing back or asking any tough questions whatsoever. I know, you're stunned. You'll see what I mean when we get into the actual interview. Here's the first clip that kind of set the tone from the get-go.
Just tell us what it is like as a transgender woman in the United States at the moment.
Oh my gosh. So I'm Black, I'm a woman, and I'm transgender, and I'm an athlete. Each of my identities is a target, especially in America.
So literally the first words out of this trans activist's mouth were ridiculous self-victimization. Each of my identities is under attack. Athletes are under attack in America now? Seriously? Touch grass. What are you talking about? And Black people not under attack in America whatsoever. Yes, we're rolling back DEI stuff that was discriminatory and divisive, but Black people still have equal civil rights. Nobody is trying to change that. The Trump administration is not targeting Black people. And even women, there's a complicated debate to be had about some of the abortion stuff. But outside of that, there's never been a better time to be a woman in America than 2025. You could, I think, fairly say that trans identity and rights are under serious scrutiny and being rolled back right now. But in some cases, that's for good reason. And the rest of this is just nonsense. Now, I'm going to show you the next part of the interview, which gets truly hysterical and alarmist in the wildest way.
How has life changed, or has life changed since President Trump's inauguration?
I woke up every day and I face adversaries when I leave my house. Now I wake up every day and I have to make sure that I make it home alive. It's really sad to see people going out of their way to make it known that you don't belong here. But every day I wake up and I decide to go out and live my life proves that I do belong here. And just existing is resistance.
Bruh, existing is not resistance. Nobody cares that you go about and live your life in many ways presenting as a trans woman. I mean, some people care, and some people are genuinely nasty to trans people, particularly online, and I don't support that. But by and large, people just want fairness and preservation of women's sports for females. That's the issue here. And I'm sorry, but there is literally I don't care if it's your truth. It's not the truth. It's a product of your imagination. It is a hallucination that you are suddenly, from the day before inauguration to 2 days after it, now every time you walk outside and leave your house, you're somehow in danger or your life is at stake. That's not a thing. There is no sudden uptick in trans people being murdered. Whatever city you live in that you go and walk around in, it's the same neighbors. Nobody's coming after you now because Trump's in office. Like, it's just a ridiculous, hyperbolic, and alarmist thing, but you hear it from the trans activist community all the time. I've debunked their broader narrative. Trans people are not murdered at higher rates than regular Americans. In fact, Black trans people are murdered at a lower rate than non-trans Black people. And the part of this that frustrates me is, where is the journalist with any sort of pushback or follow-up saying, what do you mean your life is in danger? What are you talking about? Huh? Like, what's changed? Or what are you saying? What? Like, there's no attempt to elucidate any basis for this. Just nodding along what, like, oh, you're so stunning and so brave. That's not journalism, folks. That's PR. And not what you're supposed to do as the host of an ostensibly neutral television program. Now, here's another part of the interview where Cece had something interesting to say.
I've done nothing wrong but try to be a good member and contributing member of society. I pay my taxes. I go to school. I try to leave this world better than I came to it. So if the president doesn't see us, we'll make ourselves be seen and known with goodness and love, because that's all we have to offer.
So I had kind of mixed feelings on this, because in one sense, Cece, and I'll get into another point that made me feel this way as well, but Cece does actually seem like a nice person in many ways. Like, she does come off positive, not hate-filled like many trans activists, but I don't think she understands. It may well be true that Cece has tried to be a good person and contribute to society, and I'm sure she does pay her taxes, but she has, whether she realizes it or not, done something wrong. She's competed in women's sports and won titles despite being biologically male. That is unfair to women. She has taken titles away and placing and other things from women. That is something wrong. That is something people feel is unjust and not fair. And I understand that you may be a good person in many ways, but that's the thing. It's not like, oh, everyone's just picking on me because woe is me, I'm a victim. No, you actually have done something to bring that scrutiny upon yourself. And if you want to defend it, that's fine. We can have that debate and that conversation, but don't act like everybody just decided to hate on you one day. Like, you're just going about life, minding your business, and all these mean people came after you. Like, no, you did go all the way and win a Division II championship in track and field in the female division, and you want to compete at the Olympics against women. You are doing something controversial, and that is why people are scrutinizing you, not just because they're all mean bullies or whatever. Now, here's another interesting part where Cece said she is interested in meeting with Donald Trump. Take a listen.
I am willing to sit down with the IOC, the USATF, the NCAA, with any of my international federations, even the Trump administration, Trump himself. If he wants to sit down with me and talk and have a human conversation and see me, because I feel as though social media is very loud, and to have a human sit across from you and have a conversation with them, it's very different. So I'm willing to have that conversation if they're willing to give me that chance.
What would you say to President Trump? What would your message be?
I need some explanation as to why you want to completely eradicate us from society when we've done nothing wrong.
Whoa, so there's a lot to unpack there. First, nobody wants to eradicate you in the sense of killing or eliminating. Trump certainly doesn't want that. I certainly don't want that. And people who disagree with trans women and women's sports don't want that. There are some people out there who talk about eradicating transgenderism from public life, like Michael Knowles, who I've debated. Even they, though, while I disagree with that, I think there always are going to be some genuinely transsexual people, and I'm happy for them to live their best lives as long as we preserve, safety and fairness for everyone in women's only spaces. However, even those types, even the Michael Knowles, don't want trans people killed. They want to eradicate what they see as an ideology, not people. And so it's kind of a misnomer, and it's certainly not something Trump has said or done. So this is more alarmism here. However, I did appreciate what Cece said about wanting to meet with Trump and speak to him or his team and to give her side of the story and perspective. There is a willingness to have a conversation there that I appreciate that is absent from a lot of the radical trans activists who are like, no, I can't be, different ideas are violence. I can't platform. I can't be in the same room. That makes me unsafe, blah, 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 blah. I do appreciate seeing somebody not caught up in that BS and actually open to dialogue. But the problem is that when in broader clips of this interview, I watched the whole thing. I can't just play the whole thing for you guys. Cece basically said, like, well, if they just saw a day in my life, if they just understood my experience, my truth, then they would change their mind about this issue. And that's not true, because this isn't about any individual's personal experiences. It's about science, it's about biology, and it's about fairness and general rules. So while I did appreciate Cece's openness to dialogue or conversation, I did kind of think that she doesn't get it. Like, she's missing the point. It's not about your experiences as a personal individual. It's about general rules based in science and fairness and necessity. There was another interesting part of the interview where the CNN journalist actually asked Cece about potentially awards that she had won being taken away and erased from the historical records.
I wonder how you react, though, when you read that the Department of Education has written a letter to the NCAA suggesting that transgender women who have won titles and set records, they should be stripped.
If somebody's truly working or a part of the Department of Education, they would be smart and educated enough to know that something like that that's not how history works, and that's not how the direction of progressiveness works, and you can't take back history.
I gotta say, I have mixed feelings on this, because I do believe that women's sports should never have been open to trans women. It always should have been strictly sex segregated. And so I can see the argument that, like, that award should have gone to a biological woman, because that's what those sports were supposed to be about. But at the same time, while we can change the rules going forward, the rules at the time allowed Cece to compete, and she simply followed the rules and won. So can you then go and retcon who won, even though at the time that was allowed? That seems strange to me and also kind of unfair. So I feel like either way, it's kind of not fair and doesn't make a ton of sense. What do you guys think about that one? I'm kind of curious. I can't really make up my mind on that. But the more important point here is mainstream media has to stop serving as a stenographer for radical progressive activism, like this 80-20 issue where almost everyone agrees, like, biology, not identity, is how we need to separate sports. And yet, these activists just get platformed uncritically. And I've said this before, there's nothing wrong with speaking to these people. I've invited them onto my channel. They just don't come because they're not ready for that smoke. But I've invited radical fringe activists onto my channel many times. There's nothing wrong with speaking to them, but you can't just, if you're going to do journalism, especially, like, at least with me, I'm a biased commentator, right? I have my perspective. I'm giving you my opinion. But these CNN hosts are supposed to be neutral and unbiased, but they just kind of like roll out the carpet. Say, tell us your truth. Tell us your feelings. Tell us more about your fifis. And then just let the people pop off. Like, that is not journalism. Like I said before, that's public relations. You're in the wrong line of work if this is what you're going to do. And don't kid yourself that this is helping the LGBT community. No, this kind of radical take being uncritically parroted and associated with all LGBT people is exactly why support and acceptance is on the decline. The whole thing was maddening for all those reasons, and also because they just don't seem to be learning. They seem to continue to be doubling down on this, and that's just gobsmacking to me, because there's so many signals and feedback mechanisms, from their ratings shrinking to the pushback to the public polling saying, no, this isn't right, don't do this, and they are just full steam ahead. That suggests to me that the ideological rot in mainstream media runs deeper than even I knew. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. I do take the time to read the comments, and I always love hearing what you guys have to say. And do hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Up next, this left-wing comedian has officially lost his mind. We got to check in with Bill Burr, who honestly I think can be funny. I've seen sets from him and comedy that I did think was funny, and he's pushed back on political correctness and other stuff, but he ultimately does seem to be a progressive, and frankly, he's getting kind of unhinged. He does a daily podcast, or not daily, a couple times a week actually, and it's not him telling jokes. It's him giving his opinions on things, right? Because some comedians do both. They do like political commentary and jokes. And if they're in joke mode, I try not to get like offended over the things they say, even if I find them offensive. Like a lot of Republicans are very upset about an SNL skit right now. To me, at the end of the day, it's a skit. Like it's meant to be funny. So I'm going to interpret it differently than someone doing serious political commentary. But Bill Burr on his podcast is basically doing political commentary, and he just called for billionaires to be killed. Yes, seriously. Take a listen.
Like, I am so tired of hearing about people going to bed worried about what's going to happen next week. There is so much fucking money in this country. And there's so much work being done, you know. And if you work a full fucking week at a job, you should be able to pay your fucking rent. You shouldn't have to go out and get another fucking job and still be struggling. It's bad for the country because then the kids don't see their parents and they're not getting the upbringing that they need. It's so fucking, these fucking billionaires, they need to be put down. You know, like fucking rabid dogs. They're like rabid with fucking greed and just going out and just dividing everybody. You know, just the fucking epitome of this time right now. Like how divisive we are, that like, you know, the Gulf of Mexico is now called the Gulf of America, and people get excited. Like, how the fuck does that help your wallet? It's an empty gesture, and then it's also like a racist gesture. Like, that's the white guy that's him saying fuck Mexicans without saying it. You know, like, who has a fucking problem with Mexicans? Like, what is the real problem? This is just such an ugly time.
So, there's a lot to unpack there, but first and foremost, it's kind of insane to simultaneously be lamenting what an ugly time it is in our politics while calling for people to be put down like effing dogs. You are contributing to that problem, Bill, like with that kind of toxic and insane and unhinged rhetoric. Even if you disagree with billionaires and you want to tax them more or whatever, we can have that debate, that conversation. But like, you're not the good guy when you're calling for people to be summarily executed like animals. You sound unhinged. And he's also just basically entirely wrong. Billionaires are not the problem with why we don't have... He makes it sound like, oh, there's just all this wealth and infinite resources and we just choose to let people be hungry or whatever. No. A 2021 analysis found, and I'll link to this, like I always link to the sources, that you could confiscate all the wealth from U.S. billionaires and you would fund our government, you know, federal, state, and local for about 6 months. Existing programs, not new ones, not universal healthcare, anything else. You cannot simply just take wealth from rich people and then everyone can have everything and all this scarcity. No, scarcity is the reality of the world. Okay? And the things he's talking about are very real problems that people are understandably frustrated about, like the lack of affordable housing. But it is not caused by billionaires existing. It's caused by the government. And it's broken, dysfunctional regulations and zoning rules and permitting processes that have strangled the supply of housing. And now we have all these people who want housing, but a very limited supply in all these areas. So of course prices are going to be high. People won't be able to afford homes. But it has nothing to do with Jeff Bezos, who, by the way, has created more jobs and opportunity for people than he'll ever see in his personal balance sheet reflected. It is just a demagogical scapegoat that they want to pull out these evil billionaires as if they're the problem. The billionaires didn't cause the inflation that bankrupted American families. Some of it was COVID and supply chain related, but a lot of it was because the government ran the money printer like crazy, printed trillions of dollars out of thin air. What did you expect would happen? Passed massive stimulus bills that were very inefficient and wasteful and just spent trillions of more dollars we don't have. You can't blame billionaires for any of that. It's the government that did that. And when you're just scapegoating people because they make for an easy punching bag, because a lot of people don't like really rich people, it's lame. It's just a cheap kind of cop-out. It's intellectual sophistry, honestly. And so don't stick to jokes if you're going to do jokes and be a comedian. But if you're going to do political commentary, you don't get to say unhinged and inaccurate things, then be like, well, I'm just a comedian. If you're doing jokes, that's fine, but that's not what this was, at least not from my telling and my reading of it. And I'm so sick of ludicrously wealthy people. I'm sure Bill Burr is a multi-millionaire trashing billionaires. Like, you're different. Obviously, there's a magnitude of difference between somebody who's worth 10 million and somebody who's worth $1 billion. But like, you're still incredibly rich. And the socialists are not going to spare you. The ones that want to eat the rich, get out the guillotine, they're not going to spare you just because you team up with them against Jeff Bezos. Like, you're still on the chopping block, babe. And I'd love to see Bill Burr's finances and see how much he's donating to people. Maybe it's a lot, I don't know, but it better be. If you're going to be castigating other rich people like this, it better be a huge portion of your disposable income going to feed the homeless and going to house the unhoused and all this, because otherwise you would just be another hypocritical virtue signaler, and I'm sure that couldn't possibly be the case. It was kind of alarming to me to see Bill Burr's commentary here praised by one of the most radical and insane people on the internet, left-wing streamer and socialist Hassan Piker. Take a listen to what he had to say.
On the issue of billionaires, they need to be put down, like rabid dogs. All right? Billionaires are good for no one but themselves. Okay, I've just been a Bill Burr fan for years, and I used to listen to his podcast all the time. But that's part of the reason why I love Bill Burr, is because like he has a way of speaking the language. I'll never be able to do that. Our background is different. Our aesthetics are different. You know what I mean? Bill Burr is the guy who appeals to your coworkers. Like, your coworkers will listen to Bill Burr and go, "Oh, this is a funny guy. I can see where he's coming from."
So 2 things about that clip. One, you got one of the most popular personalities on the internet, a Twitch superstar, just casually agreeing that billionaires should be killed. That's fine. That's normal and good. Like, how do they get away with saying this? I can't say, keep trans women out of women's sports without getting censored for hate speech by half these platforms, but they can just casually support killing people that they don't like. Like, the double standards are unreal on these platforms, and yet somehow millions of people look to this person for political guidance and influence, which is terrifying. But actually, I think he has a point with the second point he made. This is one of the problems I have with Bill Burr. I do find him funny sometimes, but he actually holds very left-wing and radical views on a whole number of issues, but kind of frames them in this politically incorrect, kind of working man, palatable way that I actually think is concerning to me, because it's almost like backdooring these ideas into unsuspecting audiences who, if they realize that what they were hearing was, like in the case of executing billionaires, like radical Marxism and class envy, would be opposed to it. But because they hear it from somebody like Bill Burr, who sounds like them and is kind of just shooting the shit and is funny, they kind of let their guard down and sometimes fall for it. I actually agree with Hassan. But where I disagree is with, he sees that as a good development. I see it as a deeply disturbing one. But what do you guys think? Are you fans of Bill Burr? Did you find what he said here as concerning as I did? Let me know in the comments. And now we got to check in with the woke people on the internet, because they are losing it over another plane crash and trying to blame Trump, because he's just in charge of all the airports in Canada now, where the latest crash just occurred, a Delta Airlines flight. It's actually remarkable. From what I've read so far, nobody actually died and they were able to evacuate. And it's actually a great story in terms of the flight attendants and the pilots and everybody saving lives and being truly heroic. But of course, a bunch of people leapt to make it a partisan issue, like Joy Behar on The View.
I put up with it.
Well,
and by the way, egg prices are supposed to come down, not airplanes. Well,
it wasn't just media personalities yapping about this and trying to blame Trump for planes falling out of the sky. We also had Democratic members of Congress getting in on this game. Congressman Eric Swalwell tweeted, "No president has had more planes crash in their first month in office than Donald Trump." He also tweeted, "Since 2009, how many American airliners crashed before Trump came into office? 0. When does Trump start taking responsibility for the next plane crash?" So all of this is unhinged. First, the statistics, like the claims he's making, are not factually true. But even if they were, just because something's happening while Trump is president, it doesn't therefore follow that it is his fault. There were massive trail derailments, for example, when Biden was president, and those weren't his fault. But woke people on the internet really do think anything happens equals bad orange man to blame. Trans activist Charlotte Clymer tweeted, Trump's America is where plane crashes are becoming as frequent as school shootings. Another person tweeted in a viral post, 84 people died in plane crashes in 18 days under Trump. MAGA would be screaming their asses off if it was under Biden. Now, I have to give him a point there. It is true that some people on the right would probably be blaming Biden if the same thing was happening with him in charge. But those people would also be wrong. And certainly, the kind of people like the guy that wrote this tweet would be saying, no, it's not Biden's fault. He has no control over air traffic control in Canada or whatever. We don't even know what went wrong with the Delta flight yet. Like, they would be making all these points that are now the exact opposite of what they're saying. It's like, you're so close to getting it, babe, but you're still so far. Left-wing commentator Wajat Ali further tweeted, another airplane crash. So many casualties and crashes over the past month. It's almost as if we should have had an FAA chief, head of TSA, and not put a freeze on qualified air traffic controllers. But hey, President Musk wants more of the pie, so Trump will give it to him. Good luck, Americans. He really thought he ate. He really thought he cooked. Like, the fact that Trump fired the head of the TSA and is putting in his own appointee, like most presidents do, has nothing to do with this. TSA is about airport security. You know, like the people that make you take your shoes off when you're coming into the airport. That has nothing to do with any of this. And also what he's saying about the FAA is not true. Air traffic controllers were exempt from the hiring freeze. And regardless, this accident that he's responding to happened in Canada. So it would have been Canadian air traffic control responsible for that. And we don't even know if air traffic control were the problem in this crash yet. But say that it were, it wouldn't have been ours. It would have been Canada's because it was coming into the Toronto area. Like, the math here is not mathing. These people are just partisan NPCs leaping on the latest tragedy while the corpses, or at least in this case, there are no corpses, but in other ones, the corpses are still warm to try to own Trump. And when you find yourself doing that, babe, I humbly suggest that you go outside, you touch grass, like physically bend down and touch grass, because social media has broken your brain, partisanship has broken your brain, and you are behaving in a truly ghoulish and tribalistic manner. I hope people can start to do better. But I'll be honest, I'm not optimistic that they will. What do you guys think? What do you make of all this? Let me know in the comments. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. And remember to check out the merch line. I'll link to it. But we just recently dropped all the Your Delulu is Showing merch. Go check it out, and we'll talk again real soon.